Welcome to the Biotech Startups podcast by Exceeder. Join us as we speak with first-time founders, serial entrepreneurs, and experienced investors about the challenges and triumphs of running a biotech startup, from pre-seed to IPO, with your host, Jon Chee. In our last episode, Sergey shared about his graduate years in Budapest, the leap from student life to founder, and how a single accelerator event led to his first startup at 22. If you missed it, check out part 2. In part 3, Sergey shares how he and his founders decided to start a longevity-focused fund, why they believed the field needed fresh thinking, and how access to top universities and key opinion leaders helped them build a science-first investing model. He also discusses how a rare autoimmune illness changed how he sees biotech, why patient outcomes, not hype, should guide every investment, and how that approach shapes everything from portfolio design to supporting fundamental aging research.
So now this is company number 3 now. When did you know it was time to get into investing? Or were you investing the whole time?
In my work, when I was helping others building stuff, I didn't take the payroll. I took options, right? And so I have accumulated like quite a bit of those. Look, in 2021, me and Gary, we kind of just sat together essentially, and our third partner in the fund as well. We sat together. We were like, look. So Gary was investing in the longevity field. Well, longevity, broad term, right? But in the field of AI for drug discovery and kind of the whole new era of biotech since 2016, 2017, he was deploying his own money. He made money in tech, and then he deployed as a business angel. He was, for example, one of the very early investors in AI for drug discovery, in a company called In Silico Medicine. In Silico is now $2 billion in valuation. So kind of created the whole field for AI for drug discovery pretty much. And he invested in like 2017 or 2018, something like that. So we sat together. We're like, look, you can only do this much as a business angel anyway. We spent our whole career, or most of our career, in age-related diseases in one capacity or the other, as investors, as founders, to whoever were. We basically grew up with the longevity space, as the longevity space was spinning out of traditional biotech. So all the regenerative medicine, all the epigenetic reprogrammings of the world, etc., they were spinning out in their own bubble, which started off as a not even a separate industry, almost like a cult thing to a certain extent, like a system of thought, like an unconventional type of biotech. So we grew up with that field, and we saw a lot of early capital being invested in that field and written off because it was invested in holistic science and generalist science, which was never even destined to reach, regulators, destined to reach specific drugs or specific age-related disease indications. And in 2021, we were like, well, it's time to build a fund. And we kind of had the two variables that we needed for the fund. And that was, one was deal access, because we had relationships with all the academic institutions out there that were spinning out tech, really, in age-related diseases. And I'm talking traditional ones like Berkeley's, Harvard, Stanford's of the world. We knew tech transfer departments out there. We knew key opinion leaders that were working there specifically. So we had access to early tech. We could look at the spin-outs they were creating. And then on the other hand, because we grew up with the industry, we also grew up with the KOLs, key opinion leaders in that industry. So we were able to put together, literally in a week's time, I think the most recognized scientific advisory board in that field, from Nobel Prize winners to national stem cell program directors and longevity physicians, you name it. And we strategically picked these people so that they represent the institutions where we're sourcing, as well as the areas of interest in which we are sourcing, right? So this is how the fund was started. We were like, look, a lot of capital was written off. People were investing in these let's cure aging type of stuff. But then in reality, what you had two camps. Like the aging became a thing, right? Like the whole is aging a disease became a thing. And you had two camps. One camp said, let's cure aging, and then age-related diseases never happen. Like you cure aging as a disease, you crack it as a disease, cancer never happens, right? Because aging is solved. Like Alzheimer's never happens. And then the second camp, a very unpopular camp back in the day, said, you still want to take the traditional biotech approach. You still want to take it disease by disease, because you need to solve the full puzzle disease by disease. And by solving this and by kind of tangling in the advancements in the aging biology that we have now, pairing it with a traditional biotech paradigm, we can explore these new mechanisms of action. We can explore these new signaling pathways that we were ignoring before. We can have new targets with AI for drug discovery. And maybe through this new approach or new era of approaches of how to solve these age-related diseases, this is where we can actually crack the essence of like crack them in a disease-modifying way. We call it the disease-modifying way. And by doing this, you might understand aging. Like by solving cancer in the disease-modifying way, by solving neurodegenerative diseases, this is how you understand what are the underlying mechanisms, and only then you can understand aging, because aging is too much of a holistic process. It just happens to you when you just hang around, like now. Like now, your body is creating thousands of cancer cells as we speak. And your immune system is detecting these cancer cells and fighting them off. And this is like this eternal battle that continues for your whole life. And so like right now, metabolically, you age, right? So where do you start? Like, are you sick, technically, because you age, right? So is it as a disease, or should we go piece by piece? And we said we should go piece by piece. It was largely unpopular, because we were a fund in the longevity space, and everyone expected us to invest in fighting aging versus fighting the diseases. But yeah, that is the pragmatic outlook on aging that we kind of kept. And for us, longevity and investing in longevity is investing in prolonging health span and prolonging kind of the years of healthy human performance. Not lifespan. Lifespan is not important per se. Lifespan is just a consequence of health span, really. Plus, in order to live the longer life, you really have to have the life that is worth living longer to begin with. Like, you should want to live it longer in terms of the quality and whatever perks you have. So yeah, this is how we started. It's a long answer, but this is how we started the whole LongeVC one story, our first fund. Yeah, it kind of all took off from there.
I love the way you very kind of succinctly put it. It's like, you got to have a life that you want to live. Like, why extend the life if the life is not worth living? You kind of like,
it is a very philosophical industry, this one, by the way, because like a lot of I get this question quite a lot, and the question is like, why biotech, right? Because you need to be an absolute optimist to invest in biotech. Honestly, the success rates are shit. Like it's just bad, right? I mean, your success rates are worth 5% for the companies that quote unquote make it, right? For you as an investor, as well. And we invest early to mid stage, so a ton of risk. The life cycle is horrendously long. Sometimes it's a bit of a misconception, so we can get into that. It's a bit of a myth. But people think that if you're a biotech investor, you need to be with the company for like 10 years that I've just described in this previous example with the company that did recruiting, right? So tremendous amount of risk, hugely long life cycle, very low success rate, a dismal amount of capital needed, not involved, but needed to actually create something, because clinical work is notoriously expensive. And the only reason of why you should really do this, and why I still think that this industry is, and longevity industry specifically, is the best one out there. And I do apologize in front of all the other industries right now, but I do think that way. Well, not the best one, but the most important one. And that is because it deals with an issue that everyone shares, right? And I'm not being dramatic and saying aging. Okay, we age, fair enough, but it's the issue of premature death. It's the issue of really dying, or having a increasing chance of dying from something at the age of like 60 or 65 or whatever, when you have not technically exhausted your theoretical healthy years of life and healthy performance years, but you got knocked out by something that appeared seemingly out of nowhere, or very often not out of nowhere, but as a result of your lifestyle choices and a bunch of other genetic factors, but mostly 90% lifestyle choices, actually, which is interesting. And the issue of premature death is the one that we all share, and nothing else matters, really. Like, if you die, this is a very stupid example, but it is what it is. If you die, all your crypto doesn't make sense. All your sustainability doesn't make sense, right? All your community work or whatever you're doing and enjoying doesn't make sense. Like, you have not solved the major existential issue or the major existential threat that you have. And we are in the industry that deals with that threat and tries to somehow, I wouldn't say eliminate it, but at least prevent it, or make us more equipped dealing with it in all the shapes and forms that it comes. So yeah.
I feel the exact same way. Like the way you're describing that is, a lot of the time, Exeter, we're in equipment leasing, and when I talk to like my other, colleagues in credit, they're just like, why are you in the sciences? Like, there's plenty of like financeable like assets that are not in science. And I was like, and you're like, aren't you limiting yourself? And also, isn't that just like, exactly what you just described? And it was like, but for me and for Exeter, I'll speak for us, it's like, it is the fight worth fighting. It might only like in art, like it is what gets you out of bed. Like, at least it gets me out of bed.
And you're enabling something important.
Yeah, because you're exactly the way you described it. Is like everything else is moot.
Pretty much.
If you suffer from premature death, like nothing else matters. And no one wants that. Like no one want, like, most people do not want premature death because there's so many other things that kind of,
This one, yes. Although, as surprising as it sounds, people do not want this, but they do not really acknowledge the thing that they're talking about. That one is interesting. So we do not acknowledge our mortality. You do kind of know that, or you do kind of feel that. You know that you're gonna die, in like, that it is finite. All this thing is finite, right? It's all temporary, pretty much. Like all things in life are temporary. The health, the sickness, being poor, being rich, everything is temporary. So and life is as well, as we speak right now. The interesting part is we do not really acknowledge our mortality. We know it functionally, but it's not that you wake up in the morning with the thought of I'm mortal, right? It doesn't work that way. Interestingly enough, there was this one semi-scientific experiment, right? But which demonstrated that. But whenever you think about yourself in 20 years' time, or somewhere like a future John, future Sergey, the area of our brain that lights up and activates is the area that we use to think about other individuals. So you do not associate really yourself with you plus 20 years in the future. So it is very hard to be kind to yourself in the future. And this is what makes it so freaking hard to do anything good for you long term. As dumb as it sounds, as surprising as it sounds, it is what it is. It is why it is very hard to commit to lifestyle practices, because all the lifestyle practices have compounded effect, right? They don't really have immediate effects. So you really need to do sports every day for 20 years, not to die from a heart attack in 40 years, right? I
Yeah.
mean, what sort of reasoning timeline is
Yeah. Yeah.
even that, right?
Yeah.
So for a person that lives in short-term bursts of satisfying short-term cravings, which is I want that car, I want that house, I want that meal, I want that this or that, or I need to walk my dog type of tasks. Thinking about something in 20 years time is like what the I mean it's there's no RAM for that,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
in the brain. So
Yeah.
so it is notoriously hard. Interestingly enough, one of the kind of smaller evolutionary theories say that because of this thing that we do not really acknowledge our immortality, we're capable of doing all the creative stuff and all the inventive stuff that we're doing, because versus animals, where animals are driven by their instincts and instincts are driven by the need to survive, right? Because it's this survival, really. It's mating is survival, eating is survival, resting is survival. So wild animals are living like this. And us, we grow up, we get up in the morning, we think about taking kids to school and maybe going to an art class or pursuing a career in philosophy or whatever. So we don't really think about survival every single day because we don't acknowledge the finite nature of things, right? And
Hmm.
interestingly enough, so it's a gift, it's a blessing and a curse at
Interesting.
the same time. We can do all these great things, but at the same time, it is very hard for us to be kind to ourselves in the future, to our future selves. And it is partially also what our industry, the longevity industry, tries to deal with. Although I can say there is no shortcut to that at all.
A various like I it's like you live by the sword, you die by the sword. It's kind of that
In
it's
a
a
way,
double-edged, nature of it. And I think I think about just like my own personal habits now. I'm just like racking in my head. I'm like, damn, I need to step my game up. Like just like having this conversation. It's like you were talking about this before, like we hit record. It's like, you know, not forgetting to like enjoy your life and just have like good like lifestyle habits goes
there
a super long way. Like an
there is this
absolute
thing
long
which
way.
is which was sometimes introduced. So there is health span, then there is a lifespan, and then you can add up joy span, right? And joy span should absolutely be there as well, because that is something that actually keeps you going, because you need to enjoy things. You certainly don't need to prolong life for the sake of prolonging life, right? So that
I think some
makes
people do that though, and that's like the part that just like it kind of
they
gets
do, but
gamified.
they do, but in my reality, look, I might be a very bad example. We can talk about this, but I might be a very bad example of, like, I'm very pragmatic about the longevity field, right? And I think that, like, prolonging life for the sake of prolonging life voids the purpose of life itself, like voids the enjoyment of life. So the person that does that chronologically lived longer, maybe eventually, but joy-wise never lived, right?
Yeah,
Unless you
never lived. Yeah,
enjoy the whole process of prolonging life and,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
doing all these things. But I think it's so you don't, as with anything, you should not really get into extremes to to uh to create any impact on yourself specifically. And then look, I mean, in my case, so this is a bit ironic, to be honest. So I've seen this industry, I've seen the age-related disease industry, as a founder, I saw it as an investor, and I did see it as a patient. So I'm a rare disease patient technically, on the neurodegenerative side. So I cannot be cured as of now. So the medical space does not know what to do with me. And at the age of what, 27, I think? No, 20, 28, 28-ish. 28 going into 29. I've basically experienced on myself what it takes to lose function. Interesting. It was a bizarre experience. So I got half paralyzed because of the neurodegenerative stuff. Yeah. So I have a very rare like autoimmune condition type of thing.
Oof.
Works a bit like multiple sclerosis in terms of the mechanism of action, but the antibody that is involved is a bit different. But yeah, I mean, like 1.2 million or something like that, the incidence rate. So which makes me a rare disease patient like by a mile.
Yeah.
And so I got extremely lucky getting out of it. I mean, you can't get out of it, but getting out of this major flare up that I had. But that's not the point. The point is, I got to try out what it takes to lose function at the age of not being 30, right? And it is the most. And I like I've seen stuff in my life, honestly. Like with my first company, I've been to Nigeria, I've been to the part of Sahara where Al Qaeda is crossing the border. Like I've seen fairly, I wouldn't say frightening things, but I've been in dodgy situations, right? When I traveled and then whatever. Like this medical physical thing that happened to me, which was a rapid deterioration of essentially functions that you perceive as granted, because walking is granted, right? Sensory functions are granted, and this is what I lost. That is the most frightening thing that has ever happened to me. Period. Like nothing comes even remotely freaking close. And what I can tell is that the prospect of losing anything material, of losing your house or your investment on the Robinhood account going dramatically down, or like anything that we actually make a big deal out of, is like not worth a penny. I honestly cannot. It's not that even you can compare it to losing biological function that you perceive for granted and that you're used to have. And it was honestly the most frightening thing that ever happened. And what I realized, and I got into a hospital, I got into a ER, and they diagnosed me pretty quick. But the treatment that I got was the treatment protocol that was basically 20 years old. Because with neurodegenerative conditions, your treatment flare-up, multiple sclerosis, whatever, pick any other, any sort of myelitis, right? Any sort of spinal cord inflammation, whatever that is. The treatment protocol is a horse dose of corticosteroids. All right, so you shovel corticosteroids in the patient, especially with transverse myelitis, for example. It's like the protocol. And then you drop the inflammation down, and then you see whether the functions are regained or not.
Oh my God.
And in my case, I kind of got lucky. I guess I kind of got lucky because it came back gradually. So I was able to rehab, but then the whole different ball game is how you get out of this long term and whatever. But 20 years old protocol. We fly reusable rockets to space, right? And we create digital currencies and we do all the bizarre stuff out there. And now we have AI substituting us in every single way. We still cannot treat diseases, and a lot of those. We still have very limited understanding of how these diseases work. And the most interesting finding from the hospital ward, and I was staying in a stroke unit, so they put me in a stroke unit. because there was no like neurological department. It was basically mostly people with stroke, right? And I was the only one that was eventually capable of walking in that unit, because everyone else was, horizontal, as you might imagine. Nowhere in my, like, when I was staying there and then, contemplating my life choices, being 28, 29, nowhere there was a slot, metaphorically or directly speaking, a slot where you could put the money in, even if you had the money, and you would get better treatment or you would get better outcomes. So the game is, you get what we have, right? And like, that's it. That's the edge of the progress, right? That you are getting. And if that edge is 20 years old, well, bad luck. So, and that was a bit of a revelation, to be completely honest with you. I can't say it like shaped my version of the world tremendously, but it certainly introduced some adjustments to how we look now and how I look now, with at our work at the fund, for example, because nothing that we do at the fund, whenever we invest in something, whenever we support something, nothing that we do is aimed directly at getting a multiplier out of it as an investor. We only invest based on patient outcomes, potential patient outcomes. So if patient outcomes are somewhere there to be had, and that if that actually moves the needle in a specific disease category, a specific space, this is where we deploy the capital. Interestingly enough, once you employ this logic, what happens is the good return on the investment financially for you as an investor is almost just a byproduct. Because if something yields patient outcomes, it is automatically valuable in the eyes of the pharma industry or whoever the potential buyer is. So it's not important at all, interestingly enough. And this is what people miss with biotech investing quite a lot. You actually invest potentially into moving a needle in the quality of life of a certain patient group. And that has shaped, I think, our view of the field quite significantly, and this is why we go after, the disease focused targets. We go disease by disease, and the second pillar that we go after is early stage diagnostics. And the first fund did it, at least. The second fund is doing less diagnostics now. Early stage diagnostics and what we call infrastructure. And infrastructure is everything that helps us to create drugs faster. So AI for drug discovery, all the new sequencing methods, single cell protein sequencing, stuff like that. So everything that essentially enables us to generate more drug candidates and to push them through regulatory and through testing faster. Because without that, we're still bound by this 10-year cycle for every single drug, and you cannot move faster than the traffic, pretty much, and you need to figure out a way of how to hack the traffic. But yeah, I mean, there are I can talk in length about that, but realistically, the biggest problem with biotech, and the biggest, I would say, okay, it's not a problem, but it's more of a controversy, or someone that still strikes me as a surprise, is that it is the most important industry out there, especially when we're talking age-related diseases, which people do not care about until they actually encounter said diseases. And then suddenly it becomes the center of their universe, because suddenly they realize that walking can be taken away, right? Any other physical function can be taken away. Cognitive abilities can be taken away. So they're also temporary, although you're so used to your head being bright and ever so capable of pretty much any multitasking you throw at it. Not going to happen all the time. So it is interesting. Like it is sometimes surprising how we ignore it. Yeah,
Absolutely. And I mean, it sounds like, just from hearing your experience, and thanks for sharing that, it's like it brought it home. Like it really, really brought it home. And I can see, like, it's kind of it's like the saying, like, you never want to carry around an umbrella until it's actually raining on you, right? It's kind of this thing, like it only then becomes important when you're just drenched and you're like, well, I wish I had addressed this earlier. And this is the weird like human condition conundrum that you've described, which is it really just like puzzles me when people like I also agree that the life sciences is the most important industry and deserves way more credit and also way more just like capital inflows than I love I love being in San Francisco where there's AI for this, AI for that. Like I love it. Semiconductors are cool. It's rad. I get it. It's cool. But again, like premature death is, it trumps maybe I'm biased, but it trumps it all. Like if you're not around, it's like it's all for naught. And I think, when I think about the industry, I think, we've been kind of going through the the turbulence of the last few years. But I again, to be in biotech, you have to be an eternal optimist. So I see brighter days ahead of us. And, as now that you've, it seems like the North Star for your guys' firm is like firmly set. Like when it comes to just like execution on this vision, can you just talk a little bit about just like, you were angel investing and then now this is kind of more institutional. Like how are the early years of like, you're now like, okay, you're managing funds, you're building a firm.
The first fund is done. So we built a firm. That firm has become, I think, a small household name for early stage longevity investing. We built it out with this very pragmatic take of what longevity is and what longevity is not. For us, Longevity-Drug 1.0 is essentially something that has a mechanism of action that is translatable across several disease areas. Not curing aging, quote unquote, but something where we say, well, we've cracked the age-related diseases deep enough, so we understand that this thing or this specific mechanism of action can be used potentially with certain modification on a much larger patient population. From cancer to something, like insert the name of the disease, right? So that would be honestly, if we get to support something like that. That will be ultimately like the job done for LongeVC in terms of, we've done what we could, sort of thing. So the first fund was $25 million US. 20 companies invested. We built the fund in a very unconventional way so that it has a huge team. The first fund spent every single dime of management fees on team. So it has not paid anything in salaries to management partners. So we have essentially a deal team of 7 people, plus the scientific advisory board, which is 14 people that plugs in at the latest stages of scientific due diligence, that refers deals, that kind of gets us allocations into most desirable deals out there, essentially, that we think are worth pursuing. So everything is built out, or was built out, with the only focus on scientific excellence. So filter hype, so filter the noise, just, stay with the signal. And that signal, have the impression about what it is, right, in terms of our vision of how to look at the sector. This is what we did. We did not invest in high-P theses out there. We did not invest in supplements. We just invested in hard science and age-related diseases. We're very proud to support several companies in oncology. For example, we did quite a lot of work with oncology in the field of antibody-drug conjugates, so ADCs. So for those who are listening, ADCs are these things where you can pierce together a drug molecule and an antibody and potentially create a multiple payload structure where you have multiple molecules around an antibody and the linker that kind of keeps the whole thing together. And then what it gives you is it gives you the targeted delivery because of the antibody and the kind of the payload release there. And then at the same time, it gives you kind of this multifactorial effect of these multiple molecules acting specifically on the tumor and not just blasting the whole patient as you do with chemotherapy, right? So there is much less systemic toxicity. out there. So kind of these solutions out there that are now, some of them are like 5 minutes to be a unicorn. Some of these first fund portfolio companies, so 20 companies, 0 write-offs in almost 3.5 years now, which is very untypical for biotech to begin with. So this is this is where the stake this stake on scientific DD really played out. We've supported stuff like, for example, we're early investors in the company called AOA, AOA Diagnostics out of Boston. Most of our portfolio is US. And this is the group that has created the first blood-based ovarian cancer diagnostic for super early stage. Before that, ovarian cancer was not blood diagnosed at all, because the traditional kind of your Grail type circulatory DNA approaches, they don't work with ovarian cancer. So they kind of hacked their way through it and discovered the biomarkers that you can spot, and created the assay to spot them much earlier. So now potentially, maybe 200,000. Well, the whole thing is 200,000 women saved, yearly around the globe, if that gets, of course, worldwide adoption, but still. So things like that. I mean, we never really, we're really just prioritize science. That's about it. We're now into fund 2, which we haven't had the first closing yet. So the first closing is actually in September. Like now, we will officially start investing as we now speak. This month. Fund 2 is pretty much the same thing that we were doing with Fund 1. It's just larger. It's going to be 120 million. And same thing, early to mid stage. This is where we're best at in terms of sourcing. This is where we're best at in terms of getting into allocations. And this is where people invite us as well, because we're one of the groups out there that can conduct, I think, most qualified due diligence when it comes to science, and specifically kind of the regenerational part of longevity and kind of the tech in our field. So still the same focus, still the same kind of 2023 companies in the portfolio type of target. Very much just a learning curve for us, because we see that the companies, the most successful companies and the most well-developed now ones in the first fund could have taken 4 times, 5 times more capital. So we're just doing the same thing, just on a scale, essentially. In parallel, we've created a satellite kind of a sister fund with a slightly different set of partners, which is called Ani.vc. And Ani is dealing specifically with animal aging and animal health, which is a super interesting underexplored industry, very fast growing, especially in US. Interestingly enough, pet owners, or pet parents, as they are now called, are much more willing to spend time and money on their pets sometimes versus spending it on themselves, right? So because when your dog is sick, you will do everything pretty much to try to make it better for the dog. And pet health is not that ignored, interestingly enough, as human health is often ignored, quite paradoxically. So Ani.vc deals specifically with pet health, there's also a lot of translatability, because in human pharma, most of the early stage data comes from animal
studies,
animal studies as well. I mean, they're not dogs, of course; these are mice usually, or non-human primates, and non-human primates only for toxicity, not for efficacy, because efficacy is not ethical on non-human primates. But still, a lot of translatability, a lot of kind of cross competence that we can provide with the experience that we have. And then on top of that, we also built our own nonprofit, which is the the LSF Longevity Science Foundation, and that one is in US, and it's in Miami, and it's basically a nonprofit that distributes non-dilutive, no strings attached grants to scientists that are working on fundamental research in the aging space and in the aging biology, right? And for us, it's an ultimate tool, of course, to understand what's brewing where and like what is in the very early and nascent stages of science. And not only to invest in it afterwards, but just to be, on the edge of understanding what's happening with the field, but also to as a tool to support scientists and academics working on fundamental problems in aging, before these fundamental problems can be wrapped into a company. Because in order to build a company in longevity, this is, by the way, where a lot of capital was written off, interestingly enough. So in order to build a company in longevity, give or take, you need to learn how to talk the language of the industry and how to talk the language of the regulator, which means that you need to eventually arrive at some sort of a pipeline of assets. Like you cannot just treat aging, like FDA doesn't understand it, right? Like it's not possible. So whatever great regenerative medicine or whatever technology that you have, you're still bound to pick a disease target. And you'll need to do your animal work with specific endpoints related to that disease target. And we'll need to submit your investigator in your drugs or IND package with the FDA in order to be allowed into human trials. And for human trials, you need endpoints that you're going to measure. And aging doesn't have an endpoint, right? So one of the biggest issues for longevity startups and the longevity field per se was to get over this very sometimes narcissistic, like I'm too innovative for them to understand type of narrative.
Yep.
To understanding that it's not that you're innovative and others are dumb as a tree. It's that FDA is there for a reason of safeguarding the safety of patients, right? And whatever fundamental tech you have, you really need to understand what is the shortest route and the most evident disease indication where you can prove this tech, and then kind of spin out from there with all the other indications, etc. And some of the longevity companies were successful in that. Some of them died because they never really, figured out a way of how to specialize. I'm not saying it's the right thing. Maybe we're losing some of the fundamental tech that could have been, just holistically applied because of this disease focus of the FDA. But really, you cannot regulate the space otherwise, right? Because otherwise, it's going to be anarchy in terms of people doing whatever they want to do, and all sorts of biases, and zero standardization in terms of the endpoints and kind of clinical trial designs, and you cannot allow that. So it is what it is as of now, but yeah, for us, it is still very important to support fundamental tech. And this is why we created the Longevity Science Foundation, which is a nonprofit. So yeah, quite a bit of things going on.
That's all for this episode of the Biotech Startups podcast featuring Sergey Jakimov. Join us next time for part 4, where Sergey breaks down his fundraising from LPs, how a science-first thesis resonates with investors, and how co-invest access and a deep advisory bench support the platform. He'll also talk about his animal health fund and non-profit for fundamental aging research, why longevity needs evidence-based wins, and how farmers' urgency and patent cliffs shape the next few years. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend. Thanks for listening, and see you next time. The Biotech Startups podcast is produced by Exceeder. Don't want to miss an episode? Search for the Biotech Startups podcast wherever you get your podcasts and click subscribe. Exceeder provides research labs with equipment leases on founder-friendly terms to support paths to exceptional outcomes. To learn more, visit our website www.exceeder.com. On behalf of the team here at Exceeder, thanks for listening. The Biotech Startups podcast provides general insights into the life science sector through the experiences of its guests. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from the podcast is at the user's own risk. The views expressed by the participants are their own and are not the views of Exceeder or sponsors. No reference to any product, service, or company in the podcast is an endorsement by Exceeder or its guests.